First of all, I'm really glad to be here. Thank you, Mitch. And while Mitch didn't take my class, actually, I have had the pleasure of being a faculty advisor for some of the work that Mitch has done. So if you actually have questions about entrepreneurial ecosystems, especially as it comes to things like incubators or accelerators, Mitch is the go-to guy. Now, because he's written a great paper on that. So in addition to run and go overseas, when it comes to insights around innovation and entrepreneurship, Mitch is an expert himself. And of course, as you probably know, he's the entrepreneur in residence here at Skydeck. Let me start with a question, because a lot of you are, when you're here, you're spending 2 days. And while you're spending some money, it's really the opportunity cost of your time in getting here. And this is focused on marketing. By the way, is it okay if I wander from the mic? Can you guys hear me okay? All right, great. So we're focused on marketing, but we're also focused on building businesses here. So without a show of hands, I just want you to think internally. What are the 2 or 3 most important reasons why you came here for these 2 days? And if one of them is my boss asked me to come, I'd ask you to discount that and say internally, what is it that you're hoping to attain, types of people you want to meet, information, expertise, kind of perspective. Just want you to think about that for a minute or two. And while you're thinking about that, just know as well that later we're going to do a few exercises. So if you want to write them down or you want to grab some paper, as a teacher, it's easy for me to say, now we're going to break up into groups and do a little bit of an exercise. So we're going to do that once or twice in this hour. And we're going to take elements of a course that I'm going to share with you that spans an entire semester, and we're going to crunch it into an hour. So we're going to cover a lot of things at a shallow level. All right. So think about those. I want to come back to those at the end. When we think about entrepreneurship, the vision of the entrepreneur, creating businesses, et cetera, it's a Silicon Valley image, it's an American image, it's a global image. But what's an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is somebody who accomplishes something and takes risks beyond the usual risk to attain goals and objectives, or to attempt to attain goals or objectives beyond what those resources would indicate. A lot of you are entrepreneurs here. So how do you do that? Venture capitalists invest in entrepreneurs, and they always talk about de-risking the investment. As an entrepreneur, while you're taking risks and you have that kind of potential failure out there, that fear of failure, you're trying to de-risk all the time. So when we teach entrepreneurship, that's part of what we look to do, is to de-risk, to do certain things that will help us be successful. Sometimes moonshots, sometimes incrementally. And we're going to spend some time on that. But that's not how I'm going to start our talk today. I'm going to start about talking about me and my daughter on her 18th birthday. So I asked her what she wanted to do on her 18th birthday. Maybe it was going to be a nice dinner with Dad, a weekend in Tahoe. She said, Dad, I want to go skydiving. I said, okay. And she knew that I had done that when I was 18, so I was up for that. So about 20 minutes after this photo was taken, this was me. It was great. And fortunately, we're still all here to tell the story. And I bet a number of you have done this. If you haven't, it's really a lot of fun. By the way, Groupon and Living Social, they have great deals too, since we're in this multimedia digital world. Okay, so they got me to thinking. Today, what was my experience skydiving like? I had 20 minutes of training. I watched a video. I got on an airplane. We went up really quickly. An expert said, I'm your guy, attached himself to me. We jumped that day. Boom, 120 miles an hour of free fall. It was great. Woohoo, right? That was awesome. Then I thought back to when I had gone skydiving in my college years. We had 5 hours of training. We stepped up and stuff. You learned how to tuck and roll. In fact, we had so much training that we ran out of daylight and we had to come back and jump another day. The day when we came back to jump, it was a little bit windy, and we jumped, and it's not like you free fell. Your parachute just opened, and as we started to drift, the wind started to take us out of the drop zone. And we ended up over here in some farmer's field. The guy that I'm coming back. The guy that I was with ended up almost breaking his leg, was in a cast for 2 months. All of the training that we had gotten was worthless. It was just not a good experience. The training did not equal the reality. So how does that relate to the way that we teach entrepreneurship today? We used to write business plans. As Mitch said, I've been doing this for a few years. We used to have, in fact, you still hear of business plan competitions. Here's the funny thing. They actually don't really have business plans in them anymore. We don't have business plans. We create ventures and the essential tools in real time. We're the expert guides when we take our students through this. When they apply to a Y Combinator or a Skydeck and go through these kinds of programs, you're creating those tools in real time with real-time market feedback. That's the difference, and that's how we teach it, and we're going to do a little bit of that today. And that's one of the key things as well that I would say as a big takeaway, how to be an entrepreneur, how to think as nimbly as possible, and that is experiment in real time. Find colleagues, you've got a wonderful room of them here, and experiment in real time. Share their experiences, what worked, what didn't work. One of the other classes I teach is called The Other F Word. There's 2 reasons I love it. Number 1, it's about this wonderful topic. It's how do we learn from failure. Number 2, and we won't spend, I actually get to say fuck in the classroom, and it's okay because everybody thinks that's the real F word. So everybody knows who this is, right?
Yes.
This is Walt Disney, and Walt Disney had a great quote, great entrepreneur. The way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. So here's today's challenge for entrepreneurs, and I expect it's a challenge that how many are in early and growth stage types of organizations right now? Okay, a lot of the folks that are here. It has never been easier in many ways to start an organization than it is today, whether it's a tech organization or more broadly. Especially here, there's so much infrastructure. But I would say because of that, it may never have been harder to actually break through and succeed. You know, we think about, to the extent that you're all involved, there's all of these angels and all of the infrastructure that's there, but to break through to the next level, it gets a whole lot tougher. So this is the element of kind of de-risking. So this is where I would say where to focus as an entrepreneur, and I think that these are words to live by in general, whether you're entrepreneurs, whether you're thinking about your careers, whether you're thinking about how you're going to grow your venture as a marketing executive or others. And number 1, where do you start? You start with what you're passionate about and what aligns with your values. Question? I'll say make it rhetorical because hopefully everybody would raise their hand. Well, let's go. How many of you are doing something, especially in a group like this, where you're passionate about it, where the organization you work with aligns with your values? That's great. And for those of you that are lying, wink, wink, right? No, I hope so, because your boss is here or whatever, right? But this is what you want to do, right? You want to align with your values and start there because your heart's in it. And you know that when you're passionate about it, you're going to put in the extra hours. As a leader, you always need to do that. Number 2, even if you're really passionate about it, but you're not good at it, either get the expertise, find the expertise, train up. Your chances of being successful, passionate or not, are diminished if you don't have that expertise and the ability, like entrepreneurs do, to assemble that expertise around you with a vision that you communicate effectively. And then, of course, where's that market opportunity? Is there a large need or a problem that needs to be solved that's not being effectively solved by others? And when those 3 come together, then you have that opportunity that you want to pursue. I use this as a litmus test for myself. I use it for my children. I use it for my students and colleagues. So I hope that's helpful. And then from there, you build up opportunities. We'll talk a little bit about opportunity identification. Scott Adams was a UC Berkeley grad. He was actually a classmate of mine. He writes Dilbert. I love using Dilbert because he's got this very great, kind of slightly twisted view of life. By my calculations, we can make millions by combining a mortuary business and a garbage collection business. Our customers could simply leave the dearly departed by the curb for pickup. Maybe we could add pizza delivery too, says his colleagues. Let's not push a good idea too far. So the key thing is there a market opportunity there? Maybe there is. Maybe we're pushing a good idea too far. So one of the questions that we frequently get asked, and now we're kind of getting into the meat of what I'd like to talk about here, is can entrepreneurship and innovation really be taught? Okay, let's find out. Who thinks you can actually teach on innovation and entrepreneurship? Who thinks innovators and entrepreneurs are born, not made? Here's the great thing, you're both right. I'll tell you why I think that that's the case. The key thing that we look to do, for those of us that educate this, is to do what I started out with, is to help entrepreneurs and innovators be better. Give them the tools that they need to be more successful so that they can apply those, to learn from the mistakes of others and the successes of others. Now, does that make somebody an innovator, an entrepreneur? Not necessarily, but it helps provide them with the capabilities and the tools they need to be successful. And as an educator, one of the key things that I focus on is actually the way in which we learn. Is anybody here an educator? We've got a number of educators. So you know that there are fundamentally different learning modalities. People learn differently. But one of the things that has been, and there's been some recent studies that very much show interactive education, interesting education, people retain more. So one of the biggest things, if you look at the hierarchy, we say, if you are actively involved in creating, as opposed to reading or listening, if you're actively involved in creating, your ability to retain is that much more. So the approach that we use, and again, it's very effective whether it's in the classroom or elsewhere, is something along these lines. Elements of this are also borrowed from Eric Ries and Lean Startup. This is kind of a little bit of a variation on this. We introduce new concepts, we apply the learnings every day and create new things, and then we receive feedback from customers, from experts, from our colleagues. We apply that, we put that feedback loop in place, integrate it and evolve, and then iterate. And we continue to build upon ourselves, always going back to the marketplace, getting that feedback. I know there's a lot of social media here, looking at your schedule, and I'm talking with Mitch. It's not just pushing information out, right? There's so much about social media that's listening and responding. Those are ways to constantly understand, is what you're doing working? So we provide these various tools, and what we're going to do is start with a couple of tools right now. These are some of the tools, for example, in my workshop class that Mitch referenced, that we go through. Create an executive summary. We create a pitch deck and demos or prototypes. We build customer personas. We put product positioning models in place. We build a financial model and a business model. So we are going to have a really busy 48 minutes right now. We're going to do a couple of those, actually. So there's an executive summary. How many of you have ever written an executive summary or a one-pager on your organization? It's fascinating to try and distill everything down into one page, right? It's really hard. And then we get to this point where we say, what is the problem that you're solving? What is the need that you're meeting and for whom? And we call this, we've done a lot of work here at UC Berkeley, we call this customer discovery, an expression that you're probably familiar with, which is, how is it that you go out and discover who is your customer and what do they really care about? So I want to share an example with you about this. I had a group of engineers, and they decided they wanted to build an app, a smartphone app, that helped you locate parking. And not only would it help you locate parking, actually, you could actually create transactions. So on the public, this is in the Mission District, on public streets, especially when you were after hours or meters, you could sell the information for your parking spot to somebody else. And then when you were done, you could actually sell it back. So you would create a marketplace for parking spots. And the first thing they wanted to do was to build the app. And we said, well, how long was it going to take? Well, they were good, it wouldn't take that long. I said, stop. First of all, do you know how this is going to work? What are people going to spend? is it legal to do that? Right? A lot of questions like that. So the first thing they did, as opposed to building the app, and these are all graduate students in engineering, is they took signs and they went into the Mission District and they decided to see if people would actually buy street parking spots. And they found out that unless you were at a particularly crowded time, a Friday, a Saturday night, or a ballpark in front of AT&T Park, somewhere between $5 and $10 was this amount of money that people were willing to pay for that. Because the time and the hassle, especially when public lots weren't available, was worth at least that to people. And if you could know in advance that you could buy that spot for $10 and somebody would be waiting for you, it was worth it for you. And even better, if at the end of the evening you could resell that spot for $10 or even $5, even better. So they created a very analog version of this digital vision that they had for creating an app. And then they even figured out the next thing to do is they put little business cards on everybody's windshield. And people started calling them when they realized that they could earn $5 to give up the parking spot that they had. So what they did is they validated the marketplace through customer discovery. They also figured out the business model and the pricing. They also went down to City Hall and found that it was legal to do, but there were specific ways that they had to position it that was not the way they were going to build it in the first place. So I would say, the takeaway from that with customer discovery is get out of the building really soon. If you want to launch a marketing program, you can experiment in lots of ways. And you don't always have to do it in full-on digital form or full bore. There are a lot of various ways. And think about that as we go through these 2 days to create that. So the other thing that we really focus on is personas. So how many of you know, how many of you have a persona for your primary customer? Ron or Rand? Ron. So who would your persona be?
So a junior or senior student anthropology major.
Fantastic.
Female, 20 to 24.
So you've got that person pretty well nailed. So you understand the music that they listen to, how they interact with social media, whatever. But right, so this is, it's like, how do you put that up there so you understand and live that? That's great. If you don't, building those personas are really important. That was great. So the other thing is how many of you are in two-way markets where you're actually a marketplace that is kind of matching up buyers and sellers or volunteers and others? So that's really hard, right? So what are the markets that you're matching up?
Yoga and travel.
Yoga, so
Yogis,
you've got...
people who do yoga and yoga travel experiences.
Got it. So you've got to bring those together. I'm thinking that there's somehow one or two other elements too. So you have a complicated business and something that sounds great. I want to go do yoga in a wonderful place.
Come on with me.
Yeah, exactly. I'm betting that a 55-year-old male is not right in the sweet spot. Yeah.
But you're welcome.
My downward-facing dog is actually pretty awesome.
Yeah.
California guy. So, all right. Pitching. So this is Yogi Berra. So we work on pitch decks. Why is it called a pitch deck? So I used a baseball analogy here, or metaphor analogy. I always mix those up. I love Yogi Berra too. He says baseball is 95%, mental, and the other half is, or whatever. It's like, come on. So why is it called a pitch?
You hope to
because what are you doing if you're pitching?
Throwing an idea and see if it sticks.
And what do you exactly? You're hoping that Yogi Berra catches it. The idea behind the pitch is to communicate something simply, especially something complicated simply in a way that is received in the way that you want it to be received. Pitches are funding pitches, sales pitches, partnership pitches, recruiting pitches, but at the essence of this, you have what your core offer is, why somebody should invest their time, their money, their resources in working with you and your venture. The challenge with pitches is how complicated people make them. And Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, right? I'll bet 90% it's like, I was going to write a short letter, but I didn't have time, so I wrote a long one instead. It's very complicated what we do. Let me tell you, we have a double helix, backward flipping molecular technology that is paradigm shifting in the way, it's like if you listen to technology pitches, it's like you start to glaze over. So, has anybody heard of this event called the Ig Nobel Awards? Great. Let's see if sound works. I'm going to fake the video right now. So here's what the Ig Nobel Awards are. Typically, you've got a lot of Nobel Prize winners that will explain how complicated what it is they're doing over a period of, it's called 24/7. They speak very quickly for 24 seconds, use all sorts of big words. And then they explain what the essence of what they are trying to do is in 7 words or less. So I had a venture that was very complicated. It was literally a technology to cure cancer. And what they actually did was they found ways of propagating various types of cells that would then help in the battle against cancer. The way they defined it was, they started out with 112 words, was, we grow cancer to kill cancer. Very simple. A friend of mine, a guy named Guy Kawasaki, who does a lot of work with startups, focused very simply on, we start up, startups. So my challenge now to you, and we're going to take about 5 minutes, is for each of you, in 7 words or less, to describe what it is your organization does. So jot it down, try, we're going to take 5 minutes. If you have colleagues here, chat with them. I'll give you guys a 1 minute warning.
Each 24/7 lecturer will explain his or her subject twice. First, a complete technical description in 24 seconds. And then, after a brief pause, a clear summary that anyone can understand in 7 words. And now, the next lecture by Smith College Professor Danny Adams. Professor Adams' topic, biology. On your mark. Get set. Go.
Biology recapitulates life's relationships. For example, there are initiation factors such as itis. Vocal contacts and complements stimulate countercurrent exchange. Histocompatibility in zinc fingers can give rise to chemiosmotic coupling, but germ cells can cause sticky ends, while degenerate codons and gross anatomy such as spongy parenchyma can provoke epiphytes, which usually result in a top. If it can get infected, it's biology.
Was she speaking English?
All right, so let's do 2 or 3 or 4 right now. Start with Mitch and then Ron, go ahead.
The Yelp for meaningful travel abroad.
Do you guys get it? Okay, good. Ron?
We expose students to archaeology and adventure. Dig deeper.
Okay, do you guys get that? I like that, and because there was a good description on that. Who else has one over here? And then we're going to go to the other side. Yeah, go ahead.
Long-term development with short-term volunteers.
Long-term development of what kind? What kind of development?
Oh, community.
Community. Well, I didn't quite get that. So
We weren't sure if long-term and short-term was 1 word or 2 words.
And you can fudge it. I sometimes when people round up to 10, 7 has this great, symmetry around it, right? Or lack of symmetry. One more over here. Go ahead.
Match great teachers with great schools overseas.
One more time again.
Match great teachers with great schools overseas.
Match great teachers with great schools overseas. What do you guys think? You guys get it? All right, good. These were good. Let's try a few over here. What do we have? Yes, sir.
Educational travel for inspired educators.
For inspired educators, so you know who it's for, and it's around. Okay, great. I get that. Yes, sir.
Transforming students' lives through study abroad.
Transform students' lives through study abroad. Good. Is there anything more specific you would want to make around that? I get that. I think that's great and it's inspirational. Is there a type of study, or is it really broad in general?
Experiential.
Yeah, okay, great. My daughter's actually in Barcelona for 6 weeks right now, so I'm totally on board with that. So, what else do we have? Yes, sir.
Empowering young adults to discover their passion.
What more? I love that. That's aspirational and inspirational. Tell me more. Be more specific.
7 more words.
Okay, so that's the challenge I would give to you. I like that. That's the challenge I would give you. Yes, you have one.
Yeah, we connect students with internships in China.
That's specific. I get it. It makes a lot of sense. Okay, you guys were awesome. So the challenge that you get into is how do you create something as simple as that? Because then you repurpose that in so many different ways. And it's the type of thing when you have pitches, as you all know, once they get long and complicated, it's kind of like in The Godfather when Marlon Brando had too many marbles in his mouth. You just start not to understand it anymore. So this exercise, I find, you don't necessarily use it that often, but it's a wonderful foundation to create more complicated pitches of all types. All right, let's move on. Any questions? Anybody that really wanted to share one more that didn't have a chance? All right. Positioning. How many of you have done a positioning grid for your organization? All right, we can take a little more time on this. So this is Steve Jobs. And normally, he did so many things well. I was a fan of Steve Jobs. I am not a fan of this positioning grid because I believe in every positioning exercise. First of all, who are you positioning yourself against?
Your competitors.
Competitors, or substitutes, or alternatives, or whatever, exactly. So, if that's the case, there should be a place everywhere on the grid for somebody to exist. So if we take a look at what Steve Jobs did here, he said, oh, well, the iPhone is in the upper right quadrant. Anybody who's taken a business class knows you always want to position yourself in the upper right quadrant. So first of all, at least he had it in the right place. That's not, by the way, always true, but generally that's where you end up. So here are the two different axes that he used for the attributes. So think about this. You position on the attributes that are important to your customer. So already, in 35 minutes, we've gone through customer discovery and we've decided what's our product, and we've iterated around that. We've identified our customer and even built personas around those customers, so we understand who they are. And we've distilled our message down in a way that's nice and simple. Now we're going to say it's a competitive environment out there. Is anybody here participating in a market where they have no competition?
Oh man.
So normally I would say either you're brilliant or you're extremely naive. But in your case, you may be, who knows, right? So that's fascinating. All right. So the axes that Steve used here were, well, we're either smart or not so smart, or stupid on this one. Do you want to be smart or stupid? Okay, we're voting for smart, right? And either it's easy to use or hard to use. So Apple is smart and easy to use. Now, I'm sure that Motorola, for example, wanted to be in the hard to use and stupid category, don't you think? So the challenge with some of these positioning, and it's a trap that a lot of people fall into, is where they say, well, I'm inexpensive, or I'm high value and I'm beautiful, or I'm whatever, versus ugly and low value. It's like, who would ever go there? So let's take a minute and position a brand new product that we are going to introduce for breakfast foods. And let's build a model for the marketplace where it says it's not stupid or smart or high value or low value or healthy or unhealthy. It's attributes where everybody could exist in a quadrant. So I'm going to ask you guys to think about this. What product would exist in the hot and fast quadrant? That they would say that's the quadrant we want to participate in.
McDonald's fast food.
So it could be McDonald's, hot and fast. It could be instant oatmeal. What else could we have?
Eggo waffles.
Coffee.
Right. Coffee. There we go. There are definitely options there. All right. So there's a place. I'll try and stay over here. so that you don't have to keep following me around, and then I'll walk slowly. Then, how about in the hot and slow quadrant? Pancakes, especially homemade buttermilk pancakes, right, which are the best. Or you know, the what is it, the steel cut oatmeal versus the instant oatmeal, or whatever else it is. There's definitely a place for that. How about if we went slow and cold?
Salad.
For breakfast.
Is that
I eat
yeah,
salad.
fruit salad, for example, right? Yeah.
Fruit salad.
Yeah.
Fruit salad.
Or something along, right? And cold and fast is kind of easy, right? So yogurt, or cold cereal, or whatever else it is, exactly. So what's interesting is you look at that and you go, oh, there's a place in that kind of a positioning grid for every food to exist without making a value judgment on whether they're stupid or beautiful or high value or whatever else it is. So think about your offering. Think about who you compete against, except for Ron. So Ron, we're going to spend a little separate time with here, and build a positioning diagram, and think about the attributes of who you're trying to talk to and why they care. Because when you think about going to market, not only are you going to create internal understanding and knowledge about this, but when you think about going to market, it will say, okay, your offer is going to focus on what? Your offer is going to focus on the fact that we are in the hot and slow category, and we understand who our customer is and why they like hot and slow, and as a result, this is where we're going to advertise or market, how we're going to market, how we're going to price, whatever else it is. So let's take 5 minutes and do the same thing we did before and think about those attributes. Is it price? Is it experience? Is it education? Is it a different part of the world? How different is it? Experiential? Is it physical, like yoga? Is it spiritual? What is it that you are differentiating on? I'll give you a 2-minute warning. Go ahead and think about those and build out a little bit of your positioning. Gentleman over here actually he said it in a really great way. So we're trying to avoid the pejorative. And I said yes, because nobody wants to be on that end of the spectrum. That's the stupid or the bad value or whatever it is. So you might think about it, for example, in terms of, is it educational or is it culturally immersive? Is it a long experience or a shorter intensive experience? What are some of the attributes that people found that worked for them as they started to position themselves and then said, oh, my competitor would go over here and actually would be okay with where they were, right? Because the cold cereal and the hot cereal would both be okay being in different quadrants. It's not like one was the loser quadrant. So, that's the way that we want to think about it. Don't have a loser quadrant on your positioning grid. So, what were some that you guys had? Yes, sir.
Whether it was high structure or low structure.
Love that. That's a good one. What else? Yes.
Fun A versus Fun B.
Fun A versus Fun B? What does that mean? Go ahead, though. I know there's something there.
Fun A is like fun for the sake of fun. It's just
Right.
like pure fun, and Fun B is more educational, more.
Okay, got it. So then you'll put some more descriptive words around that.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Okay, great. Yes, sir.
Indoor and outdoor.
Indoor and outdoor. Good. What else do we have?
Experiential and academic.
Experiential and academic. Good. All the way in the end. Cheap versus expensive, or value. Exactly. No, not value. You're right. Cheap versus expensive. Where are you on that? Who can afford to pay for it? One might be luxury versus more Spartan. That would be part of it as well, or rustic. Yes.
Building on that, I did price point versus diversity of options.
Mm-hmm. What else do we have?
Holistic or focused?
Very good. Yep.
To be size of companies to be placed in terms of internships.
As far as internships, there's a whole, if you're dealing with, that gets fascinating, when you're dealing with being a market maker, which you are, it sounds like, where you have companies on one end and students or others on the other, and you also have a double-edged marketing challenge. So you're going to position You need two different positioning grids, actually. You need one for this market and one for that market. You need two sets of personas. You can't just have one if you're actually marketing to two different sets of groups as a person in the middle. But they have to have that common connection point, right? The engine has to attach to the coal car or whatever else it is. If you heard things here that are useful to you, then use them, borrow them. That's, of course, what we get to do. That's why we come to incubators and accelerators and events like this. And think about positioning. Okay, let's move on. Pricing. I'm not going to spend any time on pricing. We talked a little bit about it, except to share a Dilbert cartoon with you. Don't sell your new product for $29. Offer it at $1,029,000 with a rebate of $1 million. People will think it's a great bargain when in fact it's just a huge inconvenience. And all we need is one person to forget to mail in the rebate forms. We're going to target the lazy rich. Don't underestimate a good pricing strategy and your ability to create a good business model, right? Your businesses, your ventures are different from a lot of ventures, but they still have so much in common. And really, of all of the things that I've shared here today, I think this may be the most important. And that is understand the life cycle of your customers, of your stakeholders, from the very beginning to the very end. And think about what happens at every stage. You may define their customer experience a little different because in many of your instances it's so experience rich. It's not like you're buying something, you're experiencing something. But the challenges are much the same. If you think about it, you're going to start, they need to, in the first place, become aware of you. And if you're in a marketplace, you have the double challenge of driving awareness, and then they need to become knowledgeable. Why should I even, third step, consider your venture, John? Why should I consider it? And that's my third step, consideration. And then, boom, I'm going to try it. Either it's trial or selection. And we all strive to deliver a great experience. So do I have satisfied customers as I move through the life cycle? Do I have loyal customers? Will they come back? And of course, what do we all want? We all want customers who become our advocates, who talk about us to their friends, because that's the marketing that we don't pay for. That's the most effective marketing. And it's easy to lay it out like this, but then think about, what do you need to do in your organization operationally to make that happen? Are there silos? Even in small organizations, there are silos that are amazing, where the cultures are actually different from one silo to the other, right? I see a few people going, yeah, it's amazing. How could we do this in a company of 23 people, but we have 6 silos, right? How do you think about the touch points that people have from the moment they hear about your company to when they receive an invoice or a mailing or an email or a phone call or when they land in whatever place? Do those experiences all deliver upon the work that we've already done today? The positioning, the brief description of what it is that you're offering. Are they aligned with the persona, what that person wants, the kind of music they listen to, what they do in their time? So bringing all of that together in one place is what the customer lifecycle forces you to do. And a study that goes along with that, if you want to do a little bit of work around that, is touch points and touch point mapping. And you always want to figure out, does this touch point deliver more value than it costs me? Or does it deliver more value than that touch point? And when you have touch points that detract, like if you're emailing your people 3 times more than they want, each of those touch points costs you something, and what does it do to your brand equity? It diminishes your brand equity. Find out how often they want to be emailed. Find out how they like to be reached. If the invoice that they receive is in a fundamentally different tone or is confusing, it's a touch point that diminishes your brand value. So all of those elements of how the customer lifecycle and how the customer views you through that lens, massively important. We could actually spend months, careers talking about this. But we're going to move on and we're going to talk about Bill Gates. Because the other thing that you want to do is you want to be a demo god of some sort. Now, in technology, people, that's a big deal. It's like, oh yeah, let me whip out my cell phone, tablet, computer, whatever, and be a demo god. But one way or another, you want to be able to communicate what you do. And it can be analog just as well, it can be digital. It can be a great description, but you want to make sure that you really understand it. So I'm going to share something. I was actually here, this was many years ago actually, at a big computer trade show when Bill Gates was in front of everybody and was demoing their new operating system. Okay, let's see if we can get this.
Plug it in, it's going to say, hey, I see you put in a new device, and it's going to load in the appropriate drivers. You'll notice that this scanner will load. Moving right on.
For those of you who remember the blue screen of death, which I do, it's like that was the blue screen of death, right? The thing that's fascinating is that, typically with demos, especially with technology, and we almost encountered it here, but we got it to work just in time. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. Everybody knows that. So always make sure when you're going to do something, that you have your backup on a drive just in case, and worst case, that you've got a paper version and whatever. Just basic things, but things really can go wrong. The other thing that's so important, how many of you have, how many have websites? Right. How many of you have videos on your website describing it? Okay, fantastic. Now I'm going to move on from this. You guys already have the videos, but the amazing thing is how easy it is, obviously, to create videos these days, how inexpensive, and how you can really create, much more of the broad experience. All right. So one of the key things that we also talk about is entrepreneurship is absolutely a contact sport and it's a team sport. So how is it that you build that right culture? And there's so much that we can talk about that deals with types of people and different types, and how you want the analysts and you want the promoters and you want, for selling and marketing, and how you want the more personal and interpersonal people, so that you start to create these elements of a puzzle of the right people in the right roles to go forward. But at a higher level, and you all do this, I like to ask the question, who's really committed to the ham and egg breakfast? Is it the chicken or the pig? And what's the answer?
I think the chicken would prefer.
See, I would say that the pig is committed. The chicken is interested, right? But the pig is committed to the ham and egg breakfast. And one of the key things that I look for, especially in passion ventures, high growth ventures, I look at you and I see this, and that is, be a pig. And when you look for who you want to bring on, go back to that Venn diagram. Passionate, expertise, market opportunity. Bring pigs on board in the most benevolent sense of the word, because you want people that have that passion, that are willing to be committed to your venture, to what you're doing. And I showed you earlier the picture of the one guy out there parking. 3 days later, they had people in the mission that were helping them with cardboard signs, parked cars. And they started recruiting people, and they're building this team. They've now raised funding. They are growing this venture. It's great, but they found other pigs. They found people that were passionate, because they actually put down, instead of just saying we're going to code it first, they went out and they discovered what it was, and they were infectious in that. I mean, you can see it looks like they're having fun. The other thing that we always do, and we do this here too, is we bring in experts and seasoned entrepreneurs and attorneys and venture capitalists and bankers and marketers and others to help coach our teams. How many of you have boards that help you or have those other seasoned folks? Show of hands. How many of you have your go-to folks? All right, so 2 thoughts. Number 1, build those. Number 2, when I've had teams, one of the things that I do is say, if you go out to places, meet your peers. So spend time and walk away. I'm sure you will. I'm sure it's one of the reasons you're here, but walk away with the business card or the contact information of a dozen people here that do what you do, but take a different tack from that, because it gives you a sounding board. You can say, geez, we're stuck. What do you guys do? And then we do that here. I mean, this is right here. These photos are of Skydeck right here. This is the kind of environment as the entrepreneur in residence that Mitch tries to foster, not just for his venture and what he's doing, which is obviously growing really well, but for the other ventures that are here as well. And here are 3 books that I use. And if you're interested, one of them, The Art of the Start, is from my friend Guy Kawasaki, which is a very almost simple book about here are some ways to think about a lot of the topics, one chapter at a time, that I've just gone through. Lean Startup is currently very much in vogue, but it talks about that customer discovery, the iteration in greater sense, whether it's for-profit or social ventures. And I like getting to Plan B because most of the time Plan A doesn't work anyway. In fact, it could be Plan C or Plan D. The other thing that Randy talks about in this book that's great is find an analog. So if you're not sure how to describe exactly what your venture is, use something that people understand. Mitch, how did you describe your venture?
The Yelp for travel programs abroad.
The Yelp for travel programs abroad. So you're saying, okay, I think I get that, but then when you understand what Yelp is, it helps. So find an analog which helps communicate. People get that. And then you can start to understand what's their business model, what worked for them. The other thing is find an analog. What didn't work? Or what are you the opposite of? So anyway, these are 3 books that I like. The other thing that I like, and I referenced it earlier, is I took one of my classes to FailCon, which is an event in San Francisco where people come in and they talk about, it's not about failing, although it's being open about failing, but it's about what did we learn from failure? What can you learn from my failure? What were my insights? What can I learn from your failure? And it's those insights so that we hear a lot of these things, make new mistakes, fail fast or whatever, but the key thing is what is it that I can learn from? And as much as I like to learn from your failures, you know the ones I learn the most from? My failures. Because those are the ones that I remember. So I've got just a couple more minutes. Can I keep you for 5 extra minutes? Is that okay? All right. I think we have a break. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Great. So I assembled this list when things don't go according to plan. So these are startups, but I thought I would share it with you because some of them may also resonate with you. So here are 10 reasons that startups will typically fail. So this may not be directly on point, but number 1, it's the wrong opportunity. Nobody cares. Or it's the right opportunity, but maybe it's at the wrong time. Think about Listen.com and Rhapsody, which was the first kind of large music streaming service 12, 15 years ago. And it was like, no, this is a bad opportunity because here came iPod. And everybody was going to buy their music. It's like, well, wow, iPod just bought Beats in large part because they have a streaming music service, right? And what's going on with iPod sales and music sales? They're down. Streaming is up. Right opportunity, wrong time. Wrong business model. One of the other exercises we do is we actually draw out our business model. So make sure that your business model works. Basically, when people tell you we lose money on every transaction, but we're going to make it up in volume, we know that's an old joke, right? You got to figure that one out. Number 8, the product didn't work or meet customer needs or delight. The touch points were bad. So what was wrong with the product? How do we de-risk that? Customer discovery. Number 7, we had a weak team or we had bad team dynamics or we had nothing but chickens and no pigs. 6, we just weren't operationally good. We didn't execute, we didn't meet our metrics. We didn't have the systems in place. We were all creative and we all figured somebody else would execute.
That's important.
Poor execution. That's really hard. 5, if it's an intellectual property venture, the IP wasn't as valuable as you thought it was. In fact, maybe you actually infringed on somebody else's patent or copyright or whatever else it is. Number 4, you had the wrong investors or stakeholders or channels or partners. And for those of you, who has outside investors or stakeholders in your venture? Having the wrong stakeholders, taking money from the wrong people is the worst thing you can do. As hard as it is, sometimes you just need the money, but make sure you've got the right stakeholders that meet so much of what we talked about. 3 is the failure to evolve and adjust to changing conditions. We are changing faster now than we ever have changed. Moore's Law, absolutely happening. The amount of time that companies are in the Fortune 500 is less every year. Number 2, you had a strong or unexpected competitive response. Ron is going to find that there's nobody competing with him this week, but next week there's 4 companies that said, oh, what's going on over there? And they just pop up like whack-a-mole. You've got to figure out how do you build your brand so you can whack them or build that wall. And then the number 1 reason that startups go out of business or companies go out of business is what? Close enough. They run out of money. I mean, ultimately, as long as you have money, you can kind of lie to yourself, right? But if you fundamentally can't pay the rent, the bills yourself, your mortgage, whatever, then you've got to close up shop.
Yeah, no, it is.
The other reason that they don't is that they don't drive change. So that's kind of the last thought that I want to leave you with. In fact, I'm going to leave you with a joke and a quote. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb?
How many?
Only 1, but the light bulb has really got to want to change. So Socrates said the secret of change is to focus your energy, not on fighting the old, but in building the new. So if today I was able to help you a little bit with thinking in a different way about how we teach entrepreneurship and innovation here, about some of the tools that we use, then that is what I hope I was able to accomplish. And my challenge to you on your break is to think about this. What 3 things will you try or will you do differently next Monday as a result of being here for these 2 days? And I would really ask each of you to say, I will walk out of here with that list of 3 or 5, not 26, and not none, but a few discrete elements that we're going to try differently. Thank you.